Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. Spring, 1992. A small bridal shop in Indianapolis, Indiana. Mid-afternoon, quiet, sunlight pooling through display windows. Behind the counter, 26-year-old Robin Fuldauer was working alone. She didn't see him come in. No witnesses ever do. He didn't browse. He didn't hesitate. He simply pulled out a .22 caliber pistol with a long barrel and shot her in the back of the head. Execution style.
No struggle. No robbery.
Just death. It was the first confirmed kill of a man who would become known as the I-70 killer. A ghost who stalked storefronts across the Midwest, leaving behind a trail of bodies, shell casings, and silence. This is not the story of a man caught. It is not the story of justice. This is the story of a vanishing predator whose image was captured in fragments. A face, a weapon, a walk, and whose eyes, more than anything, haunted those who survived. Over the course of just 29 days, in the spring of 1992, 6 people would be murdered across 3 states, all in quiet retail stores. All with the same weapon, the same method, and the same signature indifference. The killer didn't care about money. He didn't leave threats or notes. He simply entered, shot, and disappeared. Then he was gone. For years. And some believe he came back. Let's start with what we know. The I-70 killer's first known victim, Robin Fuldauer, was found dead on April 8, 1992. In the bridal shop where she worked alone. Police found no signs of a struggle. Cash in the register was untouched. No sexual assault. No DNA.
No fingerprints.
But they did find a spent shell casing. .22 caliber, possibly from an Irma Werke semi-automatic pistol. A rare German firearm with a long, distinctive barrel. It was that shell casing that would start the thread, one that would eventually connect 6 murders across the I-70 corridor. April 11, 1992, Wichita, Kansas. Just 3 days later, 2 women, Patricia Majors and Patricia Smith, were working the closing shift at a store called La Bride d'Elegance, another bridal shop. They were found dead by a passerby, both shot in the head. Shell casings matched. Same caliber, same weapon. Again, no signs of robbery, just deliberate killing. Witnesses nearby saw a man leaving the store around the estimated time of the murders. Here's what they described. White male, late 20s to mid-30s. Slender, with reddish or sandy hair. Wearing a jacket and carrying a briefcase or satchel. Most notably, deep-set, cold eyes. Several witnesses used the same word. Predator. April 27, 1992, Terre Haute, Indiana. Almost 2 weeks later, a woman named Mickey McCown, who worked at her family's ceramic store, was found dead, shot execution style. McCown was not the intended victim. It was a family business usually run by his mother. Investigators believe the killer expected a woman to be working there. He walked in, saw someone behind the counter, and fired. The mistake didn't stop him. He just left. May 3, 1992, St. Charles, Missouri. Another victim, Nancy Kitzmiller, 24, was working in a shoe store. Same conditions, same weapon, same shot to the head. 5 days later, May 7th, in Raytown, Missouri, Sarah Blessing, 37, was found dead inside her small health food store. Again, the shell casing matched. No robbery. No witnesses inside, but this time, someone saw him. A neighboring shop owner caught a glimpse of the man leaving the store moments after the gunshot. He described him as white male, slender build, wearing a windbreaker and slacks, carrying a bag or briefcase, and again with piercing eyes. This man would later help create the only composite sketch of the I-70 killer. The sketch became iconic in Midwest crime circles. It shows a narrow, hard face, sharp chin, messy, reddish blonde hair, and eyes that don't just look out, they look through. Investigators connected the 6 killings by the .22 caliber weapon, the victim profile, women, alone in small shops, the geographic path, all along Interstate 70. They believed the killer was either living out of his vehicle, a truck driver, or a transient with knowledge of retail schedules. Some even speculated he might have been a disgruntled former store employee, a religious extremist targeting immoral businesses, or just a thrill killer motivated by opportunity and fantasy. But then, he stopped. After May 1992, the I-70 killer vanished. No more bodies, no more shell casings, no leads. The trail went cold, frozen. Then, 10 years later, the Midwest started whispering again. In 2001, 2 store clerks were shot and killed in Texas, both working alone in small shops. Both female, both shot in the head with a .22 caliber weapon. Ballistics were inconclusive, the shells were too damaged. But the method matched. The victim profile matched. And one witness described a man with cold eyes and a briefcase. Same build, same look, same haunting absence of motive. Police started to wonder, had the I-70 killer come back? More potential victims surfaced in the years that followed. In Indiana, Illinois, Colorado, but none confirmed. Some detectives believe the killer was arrested for another crime, took his own life, or simply changed his methods. Others believe he still walks among us. Maybe he lives quietly. Maybe he watches the news. Maybe he waits for the urge to return. In Part 2, we'll track the details, how the killings were timed perfectly to avoid witnesses, why investigators believe the killer kept trophies, and how the eyes in the sketch still haunt Midwest detectives decades later. Because this isn't just a serial killer story. It's the story of someone who could vanish into any small town, any strip mall, any afternoon shift. Someone who passed you once, at a gas station, a diner, a crosswalk. Someone still out there. The murder weapon was unusual, not for what it was, but for how rarely it was used. A .22 caliber pistol, likely an Irma Werke ET-22, a German-made handgun with a long barrel and slim profile. It's not the kind of weapon most killers use. Too small, too slow, too likely to misfire. But in the hands of the I-70 killer, it was surgical. One bullet, to the head, clean, final, almost professional. This wasn't a man learning to kill. This was someone who already knew how. Each of the 6 confirmed victims in 1992 was killed with a single shot. Ballistics experts noted that the killer fired with high accuracy, minimal blood spatter, consistent shot placement, usually at the back of the head or at close range to the face. And in each scene, no signs of struggle.
No defensive wounds.
Victims were often found behind the counter, as if they were standing still when the shot came. It suggested one thing: the killer didn't hesitate. He didn't brandish. He didn't threaten. He just shot, and then walked away. Investigators began to wonder, was this a military veteran? A former cop? A hitman? But the lack of financial motive threw those theories into question. Nothing was stolen. Cash registers remained full, purses untouched. He came for one reason: to kill. But why this pattern? Why young women, alone in small shops, all near the I-70 corridor? Why kill, then vanish for days or weeks? FBI profilers believed the killer had deep-seated rage, likely toward women, a need to dominate and control, and a compulsive ritual, the methodical planning and execution pointing to someone acting on an internal script. He may have been a loner, socially isolated, emotionally cold, and geographically mobile, possibly a truck driver, a salesman, or military personnel passing through. But he also had one more thing: an obsession with routine. Here's what ties the murders together. All happened midday, usually between 1 to 4 p.m. All occurred in low-traffic businesses. Victims were young, female clerks, often alone. The killer was never seen entering or exiting, only spotted briefly after the fact. And all stores were within a few miles of major highways. The locations were Indianapolis, Indiana; Wichita, Kansas;
Terre-Haute, Indiana;
St. Charles, Missouri; Raytown, Missouri. Each location sat within minutes of Interstate 70, the main artery across the Midwest. It was a perfect hunting ground. Flat, quiet, unwatched. You could strike, escape, and be miles away before police even arrived. Police across 3 states began coordinating. A multi-agency task force pooled evidence, shell casings, composite sketches, witness reports, surveillance, what little existed in 1992. But there were no prints, no DNA, no tire tracks. Even the shell casings bore no usable tool marks, suggesting he either cleaned his weapon obsessively or used new parts with each attack. There were no clues left behind, and just enough distance between the crimes to confuse jurisdictional overlap. The killer didn't just vanish. He planned to vanish. Still, there were witnesses. A few people in St. Charles and Raytown reported a man fleeing the scene just after the gunshots. They described him as white male, mid to late 20s, thin build, about 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, reddish blonde hair, wearing a windbreaker or army-style jacket, often carrying a satchel, briefcase, or paper bag. But it was his eyes that stood out, sharp, flat, emotionless, like staring into glass. One witness said, there was nothing behind them. This led to a composite sketch, still circulated today, of a hard-faced man with deep-set eyes and a distant, hollow stare. No one could identify him. No matches in any criminal database. He had no name, just a face. Years passed. The trail went cold. Until 2001, when a similar murder occurred in Arlington, Texas. A young female clerk was shot in a gift shop. Same method, same caliber, same vanishing act. Police never confirmed the connection, but others believe the I-70 killer had returned, only now operating further south. Then again in 2001 in Houston, same pattern, and again in 2003 in McAllen, Texas. The crimes were scattered, each just far enough apart to be ignored, each just similar enough to chill the blood. But were they truly connected? Or had someone simply copied the blueprint? If it was the same man, he had changed. No longer bound by I-70, no longer striking as often, but still precise, still empty, still driven. There's a theory among cold case detectives that the killer kept trophies, not jewelry, not photos, but receipts, store tags, a lock of hair, a single bullet from each box, something tiny but personal, to relive it, to hold power over it, to remember. These kinds of killers don't act on impulse. They build rituals, and they return to them. One detective, retired now, said this: he didn't kill for money, he didn't kill for sex. He killed to feel something, and then he disappeared so he wouldn't have to explain it. That's what makes the I-70 killer so terrifying. He didn't need chaos. He didn't make mistakes. He didn't leave clues. He was a ghost who knew exactly when to strike and when to vanish. In Part 3, we'll dig into the final layer, the suspects and why none were arrested, the Texas theory and what it says about his evolution, the FBI's psychological profile, including the one chilling detail most people never hear, and why, more than 30 years later, some believe the I-70 killer is still alive, still watching. Because the scariest thing about him isn't what he did, it's how easily he disappeared. In the end, all that was left were names. 6 dead in 29 days. Robin Fuldauer, Patricia Majors, Patricia Smith, Michael Mickey McCown, Nancy Kitzmiller, Sarah Blessing.
No suspects, no arrests, no confessions.
Just a composite sketch. A hard face, thin lips, hollow eyes, and the memory of someone who had perfected invisibility. But that didn't stop law enforcement from trying. In the decades since 1992, at least 5 men have been seriously investigated. All were eventually eliminated. Let's walk through the most compelling of them. Suspect number 1, Herb Baumeister. To many, he seemed like the perfect match. A well-to-do family man from Indiana, a successful business owner, and secretly a suspected serial killer. In 1996, police discovered over 11 human remains buried on his property. All were male. Most had vanished from local gay bars. Baumeister fled to Canada and took his own life before he could be questioned. Some believe he could have also been the I-70 killer, but there's no real evidence. Wrong victim profile, wrong MO, and too much overlap in timelines. Baumeister was a killer, but not this killer. Suspect number 2, Tommy Linsells, a confessed serial killer, executed in 2014. He claimed to have murdered over 70 people, drifted across the Midwest, killed indiscriminately. The problem? Sells was in jail in 1992, around the time of the I-70 spree. Another dead end. Suspect number 3, a man from Akron. In the early 2000s, a man from Akron, Ohio, was picked up after an attempted abduction. He matched the I-70 sketch, had a history of violence against women, owned several small-caliber firearms. He was interrogated, his guns tested, but the ballistics didn't match, and the evidence fell apart. Still, many investigators say he came close, too close, but the case began to shift in 2021. That year, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, working with the FBI and local jurisdictions, reopened the I-70 Killer Task Force. Why? Because of new ballistic software, new DNA analysis, new ways to track down old ghosts. And there was one name, a suspect not previously revealed to the public, who suddenly came under scrutiny. But the name wasn't released. The man is still alive. And authorities say they're waiting for one final piece of evidence. A match, a DNA confirmation, a traceable link. Until then, it remains classified. The Texas theory. Then there's the lingering mystery of the 2001 Texas murders. Arlington, Houston, McAllen, all featured female clerks shot in the head. All killed inside quiet, low-traffic shops. All with .22 caliber weapons. The method matched. The setting matched. The absence of robbery matched. But law enforcement never connected them to the I-70 case officially. Why? Because the ballistics were inconclusive, and the composite sketch from 1992 showed a man in his late 20s. By 2001, that man would have been approaching 40. But the Texas witnesses described someone still in his 30s. This raised a disturbing possibility. Were there 2 I-70 killers? One in 1992, another a decade later, a disciple, copycat, a fan, or was the original simply aging better than expected? What the FBI thinks. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit built a psychological profile of the I-70 killer. They concluded he was likely a white male, 25 to 35 in 1992, had some military or firearm training, lacked strong social ties, possibly worked a transient job, salesman, trucker, seasonal worker, had deep-seated resentment toward women, and perhaps most chillingly, they believe he returned to the crime scenes. Several reports emerged years later of a man, matching the sketch, seen standing outside the shops, long after they had closed or changed ownership, just watching, like a man revisiting old trophies, or replaying the feeling. Why was he never caught? You'd think a man who left 6 bodies across 3 states would leave something behind. But the truth is, the I-70 killer operated in a pre-surveillance America. There were no security cameras in most shops, no cell phone tracking, no automatic license plate readers, no DNA databases that worked across state lines. He moved through pockets of silence. He killed in towns where the local PD might only have 3 or 4 detectives, all juggling other cases. And he never overstayed his welcome. One shot, gone in seconds, on to the next state. He exploited bureaucratic slowness, technological gaps, and our collective disbelief. Because even in 1992, the idea of a serial killer roaming the highways, killing strangers without warning, felt like fiction. But it wasn't. Is he still out there? The I-70 killer would likely be in his mid-60s now. He could be a retired handyman, a grandfather, a man who shops at your local Walmart, a guy who smiles at your dog and says, "Good boy," or he could be dead, buried, ashes, lost to time. But if he's alive, he's watching news reports, watching the aging sketch still circulated on TV, watching videos like this one, and wondering if anyone will ever get close enough to see past those eyes. Because when it's all said and done, the only thing we ever truly knew about the I-70 killer was his eyes, that flat, glassy look, like the man inside had long since disappeared. If you have any information, any memory, any name, any face, contact the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP. Even now, your tip might make the difference. Until then, he remains a phantom on the freeway, a shadow with a .22, and a list we never found.